Have you ever wondered about the origins of what is often dubbed the world's oldest profession? Let's journey back to the cradle of civilization, to the ancient lands of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Here, in the heart of these thriving societies, we find the dawn of prostitution. In Mesopotamia, the concept of sacred prostitution existed, where women served as priestesses in temples, offering sexual services to honor the goddess of fertility, Ishtar. This practice was deeply ingrained in the religious fabric of their society. Meanwhile, in ancient Egypt, prostitution was not explicitly institutionalized but was a common occurrence. It often existed within the confines of the bustling marketplaces, where women exchanged sex for goods or currency. These societies, with their unique cultural and religious contexts, laid the groundwork for the existence of prostitution. From these cultural and societal norms, a profession was born, one that has withstood the test of time. From these early beginnings, the institution of prostitution has evolved in various ways across different societies. As societies evolved, so did the roles and perceptions of those involved in commercial sex. The classical period in both Greece and Rome had its unique perspectives on this profession, influenced by cultural, social, and political factors of their times. In ancient Greece, prostitution was not only legal, but also taxed. The profession was split into different categories, with the highest rank being the hetairae, or courtesans. These were educated women who provided companionship and intellectual stimulation to men of the upper class, in addition to sexual services. They were considered an integral part of society, often participating in public debates and social events. Meanwhile, in ancient Rome, prostitution was widespread and well-organized, with brothels operating throughout the city. While sex workers, known as metropolises, were often stigmatized, they were also protected under Roman law. They had the right to own property and even sue in court. However, the status of sex workers varied considerably depending on their rank and clientele. Higher-ranked courtesans enjoyed a certain degree of respect and autonomy, while those at the lower end faced harsh conditions and societal disdain. Interestingly, the ancient societies also saw instances of men engaging in sex work, catering to both male and female clients. This was particularly prevalent in ancient Greece, where male prostitutes, or kynidoi, were a common sight. Despite the varied experiences of sex workers, the profession continued to thrive, adapting to the changing tides of societal norms and attitudes. The Middle Ages brought about new challenges and shifts in the perception of prostitution. As Europe transitioned from the Roman Empire's fall, the perspective on prostitution underwent a significant shift. A moral tug-of-war characterized this era. On one hand, the Church, wielding considerable influence, condemned prostitution as a sin. Yet, on the other hand, the Church also recognized it as a necessary evil, a lesser vice that curbed the potential of greater sins like adultery and sodomy. This dualistic view led to a paradoxical approach towards handling prostitution. While it was publicly denounced, it was also tacitly allowed to function. Regulated brothels, known as stew houses, emerged in many towns, often owned by municipal authorities. These establishments provided a controlled environment where sex work could occur under specific rules and regulations. Sex workers during this era, mostly women, were subject to a life of paradox. Despite their profession being seen as sinful, they were also expected to uphold a semblance of decorum. They were required to dress distinctively, often in striped hoods or belts, as a signal of their profession. Yet they were also expected to attend church and confess their sins regularly. The Middle Ages saw prostitution as a complex and contradictory institution, reflecting the era's societal and moral tensions. As we move forward in history, the world of prostitution continues to evolve, reflecting the societal and cultural shifts of the times. The modern era ushered in significant changes in the world of prostitution. As the world entered the age of industrialization, cities grew, populations exploded, and new economic realities emerged. These shifts had profound impacts on the institution of prostitution. Red light districts, named for the red lanterns traditionally hung outside brothels, became a common feature in many cities. These districts came to symbolize both the allure and the dangers of urban life, offering a mix of vice and entertainment that drew in locals and visitors alike. But the rise of these districts wasn't without controversy. Many saw them as a necessary evil, a way to contain and control the sex trade. Others viewed them as a blight on the urban landscape, a source of crime and immorality. This debate led to a shift in laws and societal attitudes towards prostitution. In some places, efforts were made to regulate the industry, with mandatory health checks for sex workers and licenses for brothels. In others, there was a push towards criminalization, with harsh penalties for those involved in the trade. The modern era also saw a change in the way society viewed sex workers. The romanticized image of the courtesan gave way to a more complex and often negative portrayal. Prostitution was increasingly seen as a problem to be solved, rather than a profession to be regulated. This shift was reflected in the growing movement to rescue and reform sex workers, a movement that often overlooked the agency and autonomy of the women it sought to help. This era also saw the emergence of new forms of commercial sex, such as escort services and online platforms, which offered new opportunities and challenges for those in the industry. These developments, along with the ongoing debates around legalization and regulation, continue to shape the world of prostitution today. Yet despite these changes, the profession remains shrouded in controversy and stigma. In our present day, the debate surrounding prostitution continues unabated. Prostitution, in today's context, is a subject of intense debate and controversy. In many parts of the world, it remains a criminal activity, while in others it has been decriminalized or even legalized. The question of whether to treat it as a crime, a public health issue, or a matter of personal choice is at the heart of these debates. On one side of the aisle, there are those who argue for the complete decriminalization of sex work. They view it as a legitimate occupation that should be regulated like any other, with protections in place for the safety and rights of workers. They believe that decriminalization would reduce violence and exploitation, improve health outcomes, and empower sex workers to control their own lives and careers. On the other side, there are those who see prostitution as inherently exploitative and damaging. They argue that it should remain illegal in an effort to deter the practice and protect vulnerable individuals from being coerced into the trade. Amid these polarizing viewpoints, the voices of sex workers themselves are often drowned out. Many of them argue for the right to work in safety, free from the threat of violence or arrest. They call for the recognition of their rights as workers and human beings. To gain deeper insight into this intricate debate, we've spoken to various experts, activists, and individuals with lived experience. What we've learned is that the issue is far more complex than any binary argument can encompass. The realities of sex work vary widely, shaped by factors such as geography, social norms, and individual circumstances. There is no one-size-fits-all solution to the question of prostitution. What's clear, however, is that any approach must prioritize the safety, dignity, and rights of those involved. Whether they are in the profession by choice, circumstance, or coercion, they are individuals deserving of respect and protection. As we strive to understand this complex issue, it's crucial to ensure dignity, safety, and human rights for all involved. From ancient times to the present day, the history of prostitution is a complex and multifaceted tale. The journey we've embarked on has taken us from the dawn of civilization, through the corridors of antiquity, into the heart of the Middle Ages, and all the way to our modern metropolises. Each era has shown us a different face of this age-old profession, shaped by cultural, social, and economic dynamics. We've seen the sacred temple priestesses of ancient Mesopotamia, revered for their divine connections. We've walked the streets of classical Athens and Rome, where courtesans held a unique and sometimes influential position within society. We've ventured into the medieval period, witnessing the church's contradictory stance and the evolution of brothels. We've crossed the Atlantic to the Wild West, where soiled doves were both a staple of frontier towns and a symbol of the era's moral ambiguity. As we entered the modern era, we saw the profession adapt once again, reflecting the complexities of industrialization, urbanization, and social change. And today, we stand in the midst of ongoing debates about the legality, regulation, and rights of those involved in sex work. The history of prostitution is not just a chronicle of the profession itself, but also a mirror reflecting societal attitudes towards sexuality, gender, morality, and power. It's a story of resilience and adaptation, of individuals navigating a profession often marked by stigma and marginalization. The past cannot be changed, but it can be understood, and from understanding comes the chance to shape a better future. As we continue to delve into this intricate past, we must also strive for a future that respects and protects the rights of those engaged in the world's oldest profession. It's a future where dignity, safety, and human rights are not just ideals, but realities for all. As we continue to explore and understand this intricate past, we must also work towards a future that respects and protects the rights of those involved in the world's oldest profession.